So I'd like to call today's Equal Employment Practices Board of Commissioners meeting to order. It is the 252nd meeting of the EEPC. And do we have a motion to adopt today's November 4th, 2021 EEPC agenda?
Second. Approved. Approved the motion.
A motion from Commissioner Alcantara, a second from Commissioner Reese. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Abstentions? Hearing none, the motion passes to adopt today's agenda. First order of business will be a roll call of commissioners. The Executive Director, if you can call the roll, please.
Yes. Calling the roll, the Chair and Commissioner Aldrin Bonilla.
Present.
Vice Chair and Commissioner Elaine Reese.
Present.
Commissioner Minosca Alcantara.
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next order of business is the approval of the minutes. The minutes are for September 15th, 2021 EEPC meeting. Do we have a motion to approve?
I move to approve the minutes.
We have a motion to approve by Commissioner Reese. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second by Commissioner Alcantara. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Pardon me, I skipped a step. Are there any discussions on the minutes? Any corrections, approvals, points? I just want to punctuate in the minutes, and again congratulate the EPC because in the minutes it mentioned this year you're on track for 53 compliance resolutions, which would exceed the standard of any other year for the EPC. So I just wanted to punctuate that again because it really jumped out in the minutes.
Thank you.
But with no need for edits or changes to the minutes, do we have a motion to approve the minutes? Pardon me, we already motioned. Do we have all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Abstentions? Hearing none. The motion to approve the minutes passes. We have the next order of business is old business. And as part of old business, we have an update on the EEPC jurisdiction regarding the libraries, which was a inquiry prompted by Commissioner Reese at our last EEPC meeting. And I turn to General Counsel and Director of Compliance, Jennifer Shaw, for an update.
I just wanted to let everyone know that on September 28th, we sent a formal request to Corporation Counsel requesting that they weigh in with a formal opinion regarding our jurisdiction over the libraries. Prior to that formal communication, we had had informal emails with the Chief of Legal Counsel and the Chief for Employment Policy and Litigation at the Law Department. And as of now, it is still in their hands reviewing. We haven't received a response yet, but it was only September 28th, and I know that there's a lot going on with the vaccine mandates, so it might take a little longer than usual.
Understood.
I will follow up if we don't hear by the end of the month. I will follow up with them and see if there's any movement on it.
As a aside, when was their new Corp Counsel put in office? Because I assume that's part of the, she's been there for a year or less, I think.
Corp Counsel just started a few months ago, but
yeah.
She's been at the law department for 20
For a long time,
years.
yeah, no, I know.
Yes. Yeah, Georgia.
But it's new to her role, so
yes.
That may alter the timing as well.
I would imagine that would have some impact.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this topic? Hearing none, we go to the next order of business, which is new business. First part of new business is the 2022 proposed meeting schedule, which is part of your documents. The next meeting will be January 20th, customarily held on Thursdays, so that's a Thursday at 10:30 a.m., and then you see the meeting schedule for the remainder of the calendar year. Any comments, questions, or concerns about this proposed meeting schedule? Commissioner Reese.
I think holding a meeting number 7 is just a bad idea. Yeah. That is the middle of the, quote, vacation season. Yeah. So I would strongly recommend you hold one in October or go back and do one in March. But I just think...
the August one.
The August one. I think that's just a bad idea. My guess is you're going to find, I mean, there are only 3 of us, one of us is apt to be someplace else.
Well, hopefully by then we have a full complement of.
That would be wonderful, but I'm dealing with reality right now. I'm being very pragmatic.
Assuming we don't. January, February, March, so would people be more amenable, I mean, by people I mean Commissioner Alcantara, would you be more amenable for a March, meeting to replace the August one, or an October one?
Do they need to be 10 meetings in the year?
Yes.
According to the city charter, correct.
Okay. I prefer October than March.
All right. And I'm agnostic, so since we have 2 Octobers, if the, EEPC can make that change. So, this is not
Otherwise, I have no comment.
Yeah.
Next, in terms of the new order of business, we have the 2022-2025 EEPC quadrennial plan.
So just so that we're all on the same page, what we submitted was a plan for 2022, 2023, 2024, and 2025 of approximately 140 or so, plus or minus, entities that we propose conducting audits during those years for. Looking at the plan for 2022, I noticed that there are a number of community boards or president's offices on for that year. I propose that, we go back and take another look and see if we can redistribute some of these agencies so that we can look at some of the larger agencies in the 2022 year, which may be more appropriate in terms of the local law 13 report that we're working on.
That makes a great deal of sense.
Sounds prudent. Yes,
Are these
Commissioner
dates based on the last time they had their, okay.
Yes.
Yes.
And can you move agencies whose last audit happened like a year and a half ago without a problem, or that would be a problem?
We can, we must audit every 4 years,
Okay,
but we can audit sooner than that.
okay, okay.
I think the only thing that would prohibit movement would be if we have to add additional entities to this plan, because we might need to audit these folks, because it was 4 years since the last audit. So if we have to audit all these people, plus if we want to add, it's the first year of an audit, it might be a little.
Well, I have a different comment. I really do believe that you should delay what I would call the first 6 on your audit plan for 2022. I just think that it's not prudent to attempt to do newly elected political leaders when they're putting their staffs together in the first year. I mean, they literally come into office in January. They will be appointing people from January through to June. I think you should delay those first 6 into the next year, even though it's 4 years ahead. And then I agree with Jean. I would take, since we know the police department and the fire department are the larger employers, I would put them in there. And if you take the 6, it's really about numbers for local law. And if we're looking at, in this new audit plan, promotion and placement, then we really should have the fire department and the police department up front. At least that's my opinion.
Noted. Any other comments on the schedule?
And sanitation, probably.
There are 2.
Aren't those the largest employers of people?
Yes.
And if you then reduced it so you're not doing, so if you're doing only 26, is that what this number is on your audit plan, or you've got 31? If you reduce it down to 26 and put your heaviest ones in there in terms of your workload, I think that's a workload you can manage, and I think it reaches what we need for Leticia.
You highlighted 2 of them Is there any particular reason?
Is there a legend for the two you highlighted, or
Yeah.
to indicate
Oh,
what the highlight means?
the highlight is because these two agencies are combined.
Ah, okay.
They're not quite combined, but the Civic Engagement Commission is a newly formed commission, and they don't handle their own administrative, processes. So their, EEO office is handled by DoIT, ironically. So when we audit DoIT, we are essentially auditing both DoIT and the CEC's employees. So that's why the EC has to be on there, because it is an entity, but we're not doing a separate audit of them because there is no EEO office.
Ah, okay. Thank you.
So based on that, based on that update, and consistent with the logic of Commissioner Reese, we have to then reconsider doing any of the community boards. So instead of those 6, it's 15 that we might have to reschedule. Because the Bronx Community Board and Staten Island Community Boards that are upfront in the first year are also products of whatever EEPC policies and EEO identified personnel the borough presidents have. So
Okay,
essentially, that's their HR or back office.
okay.
So, we must figure out how to,
You could put the community colleges in there, because those won't change. So if you transfer the community boards to the community colleges, those won't undergo the same changes. Those will be in place. And then oath would stay in,
so if you can give us a proposed,
New list.
revised list.
yeah.
Any other discussion or conversation related to the, audit plan?
It won't delay you if it's on, if we discuss it at our next meeting, correct?
No, because we usually don't send out our initiation letters until, the end of December or the first week in January.
So if you came back to us and we approved one at the next meeting, you can still, it would
We'll
still
have
meet
time
your
to send out
requirement.
the
Okay, I
initiation.
just want to be sure.
Is this subject to a formal vote? I don't think so, right? Is that?
No.
No,
So even in the interim, if we can just agree and come to a consensus that you don't even have to wait till the next meeting. Any other conversation, dialogue on this issue? Hearing none, the next order of business is the audit update, the 2022 audit development. And for that, I turn to the Executive Director, Jean Victor.
Okay, included in your packet, should be the, audit standards, that we would like to use for the next audit starting next year. The audit standards were developed in accordance with, a review of the Local Law 13, project, and we, tried to gear these standards, these were the standards that were selected, in the hopes of being able to inform the Local Law 13 report. If you look at them, we've got the issuance and distribution of posting of policies and the EEO plan, entity training. We've got complaint and investigation procedures. We're looking at employees and applicants with disabilities. And then we get into the workforce review and analysis, where we look at the entity's workforce to determine how they are addressing any barriers or obstacles to employment, how they recruit in the next section, how they select and hire and promote people within their entities, and then finally, as for the last piece, which would be how they, we would ask them about assessing the manner in which the candidates were selected for employment in both the discretionary titles that they have and in their civil service titles.
Commissioner Reese?
I have a suggestion, which is that I believe this is different, that it's different from your sexual harassment. It's a different way of looking at issues and data. I would strongly recommend that once we approve the, quote, audit schedule, that you call all of the first-year audit EEOC officers in and discuss with them the new standards, have them answer whatever questions they have in that meeting, have them raise those questions, have Letitia there so she explains local law 13 and why this data is being collected, why it's different. It provides you with the ability of having a face-to-face meeting with them all. It provides you the ability for having a common understanding. If some of them don't show up, I would re-invite them again so that you do it more than once if that turns out to be necessary. But this is, it provides you, I think, with two different opportunities. An opportunity to face-to-face meet them as opposed to doing it on the phone so they know who you are and you know who they are. And it also provides you with the ability to sell your services, sell your importance to them so that they understand that you're a member of their team and supporting them back to their commissioner, who may or may not be a new commissioner, but it's highlighting the importance of this activity for them and trying to be supportive to them as they get this data, and also explaining why it's different from what they did before. So that's just my suggestion.
Thank you. Commissioner Alcantara?
What are discretionary titles? What do you mean by that?
Those are titles where they're not subject to civil service rules,
Okay.
where the agency has the opportunity to fill a position without having to go through the civil service.
So,
They are
managerial.
essentially the political titles. So
Okay.
I was a deputy commissioner.
Okay.
General counsels tend not to be civil service either, for they are appointed, often appointed from the law department, but they are still an appointed title. Those are for want of a better term, those are the executive titles within a
Okay.
commission, and that's harder to get at.
Okay.
Anything that's not on a civil service list, there's more room for discretion in hiring. When you have a civil service list, you're very limited in who is coming through your door and what you can, use to select them. So if it's a civil service list, it's one way of recruiting and selecting. And if their title's not on a civil service list, for example, my executive agency counsel, you have more discretion in your recruitment and your selection of those individuals.
So does that include management? Because management tend not to be civil service.
Sometimes, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
No, we're really trying to crack that nut in some manner,
Okay.
because it's really, there is far more discretion and far more, for want of a better term, pressure coming from outside sources in the appointment, that not necessarily, it's not necessarily just
Quick
an
question.
appointment. It's based on merit, I suspect, but it's different anyway.
When you look at the different office of the mayor, all the different borough presidents and all that, do they, in their appointments, have to segregate their candidacies of people, or they don't have to do anything? Like they appoint...
Within the office of the mayor, there will be civil service titles.
No, but I mean, let's say that the mayor comes in and appoints the commissioner of DVC, commissioner of the different commissioners that are not civil servants.
Right.
And all the assistant and deputies and whatever. Are those population in their audits looked at, or they don't have to disclose anything?
No, they are within the audit, but
Okay.
that's the piece I was talking about, is trying to crack that nut.
Okay.
While they're not, they are still city employees.
Right. And therefore,
become audit,
subject to-
evaluate, and have compliance over all city employees. So they're still city employees, so their composition is still under the purview of our audits.
and they
No, but
are
the
still
question
looking at
is-
local law.
Let's say the commissioner of sanitation, she's a mayoral appointee. Does she show in the mayor's
No,
evaluation? Or she shows in,
Sanitation.
so there's no way for us to track, is the mayor appointing only, Hispanic men to all the positions. There's no way that, there's accountability that we can have that way, or?
I see your point.
You know what I'm saying? Like, what I'm trying to get
But you
at.
can, because at the end of the day, you have your picture of all the commissioners.
Okay.
So that picture at that level will show you who's been appointed to it. And since it's all coming from the mayor, the executive, you will have that picture.
No, that we have, but what I'm saying is when we evaluate the mayoral's office, is that something that we look at and say, if we look at their employment practices, do we get to say, we noticed that your commissioners all look this way, and, or we don't?
It's a
good question, but I don't think we look at it that way.
Okay,
We look at the office of the mayor, and we are looking at within his office,
Okay.
what the appointments are.
Okay.
We're not looking across the board.
Yeah, across the board.
For that, I would imagine that seems like a subset of a study looking at like leadership,
Yeah,
perhaps like diversity in leadership or a representational leadership.
yeah,
And that's something that maybe in the future,
yeah,
if you so want to move Commissioner Encantara, that we consider that
yeah.
as a possible subject matter for future research.
Noted, thank you.
Thank you.
An interesting question.
In terms of, so some of the comments I have around the audit standards, so the first focus is like the focus on underutilization. Are there any particular compliance areas that like speak to underutilization? Because I didn't get the, other than it just saying focus on underutilization, like underutilization itself doesn't really appear on any of the closest thing we get to is like a workforce review and analysis. But I was wondering if some signal or some specific part of it can really zero in on underutilization. Is that a fair point,
Yeah,
or am I missing something?
And it really relates to the hiring practices of the agency and their promotional practices. So we already know the agencies that have underutilization in their particular job groups. So basically, we'll be asking those agencies, what are you doing to address underutilization? These standards that you're looking at are really standards that are going to be cutting across all of the major agencies. To accompany those standards will be questions that we are going to be asking them to answer individually, more of a narrative as to what they are actually doing to increase the pool, the hiring pool with women and minorities, to make sure that every opportunity is being given to make sure that we consider women and minorities for every hiring and every promotion.
I see, so this is the general template, and then it's somewhat customizable based on the background data we have per agency as to how we probe deeper findings.
Yes,
Thank you.
I think our approach that we tentatively think we will take is that once the analysts are assigned their audits for the year, they will then go and look at the seeds data and all the other background data for each of these entities so that when it comes time to auditing them, they know where the focus needs to be. They know that this particular
They know where they
agency
have to dig.
has an underutilization in this particular job title, and they will know to focus on those particular job titles or job groups, depending upon what is happening in the agency.
That's very reassuring. A second concern I have, and it goes back to something that I reiterate often around the difference between compliance and commitment, and compliance being like a de minimis standard, and elevating our role in interjecting an elevation of what we could, intervene on. With that said, I would like for your consideration that we take out the ors. So like, that's so de minimis. So when we do something like distribute or post or electronic copy, make it and, especially post-COVID or with COVID, for compliance to mean that you have a poster on the second floor next to a restroom or around the corner of an elevator that may or may not be trafficking, that's not the spirit, and it's not what our commission, really wants. So once there's a policy, it ought to be posted, there ought to be paper copies for people, ought to be emailed, you know, and assume that not everybody's going to be at the workplace. Some may be remote, some, you know, so I think elevating the compliance and the practice procedure so that anytime there's an or, we kind of relook at that and make it and, so that every absolute vehicle of communicating what the policy is availed of.
Going to commitment, it seems to me that with a new mayor coming in and therefore new commissioners, it's probably a new opportunity for us to introduce ourselves to the new commissioners. And I would strongly suggest that we look at whether or not the chair wants to, depending on what we're talking about, but maybe the chair wants to go to some of the larger commissions to introduce himself to the new commissioner and explain what we do and how we do it and how important it is. And if we are doing the larger entities during year one, maybe that's an opportunity as part of the beginning of an audit. So I would strongly suggest that we look at that as the introduction of an audit being a personal thing again and going back to it. I know it takes time. I know it takes time in terms of your time and finding a time to meet, but I think it might very well strengthen our presence.
Thank you, Commissioner Reese. You're absolutely right. That is the leadership team's EEPC's intention with Jean, Jennifer, Leticia, Michael. Prior to those meetings, we're doing some of the background work, as the commissioners know, around, for example, our theory of change or logic model. Like, who is it that we are? Do we have a way to really just communicate that in a one-pager? And why do we matter? Do we have a way to communicate that? You know, what's the logic model? So you're absolutely correct. We want to make sure that we have the products or the things that can really communicate our value to individuals that may be meeting us for the first time and they're like are enormously busy, so that we want to be able to engage and maximize whatever 15 minutes we may have before that.
So it's just having a leave behind, but I'm really talking about, here's a process, it may be bothersome, it goes down to EO, you don't know about it, you're the new commissioner of the fire department. We want to explain to you why we're doing it. There's been litigation. We think this is a way to forestall that from happening again under your leadership, and here's what we do, and we're coming in to meet you. I mean, I don't want to orchestrate it, but I think we ought to look at whether that's something that we should reinvigorate.
Absolutely. And it's something that all commissioners as well should, according to their availability, be invited to participate in. So
well, you know, depending on, I think it's important for you as chair.
Point well taken.
Okay, I just, for you to be the person that does it.
The next,
with the executive director, obviously.
The next comment I have around the audit standards is around conversations or language around training and types of trainings. I'm not sure in this language, but there should be some place where we can specify, right, what the state of the art is around trainings, right? Like, I don't think all trainings are equal, and maybe all trainings may not be vetted or approved in a certain way, and we don't want to necessarily get in the business of saying what's approved and what's not, but at least from an educational learning point of view, direct people toward what those resources might be, or what we find to be state of the art, cutting edge, or the most robust substantive trainings on these topics.
We currently do that with our audits. We require certain trainings. We check, every entity is supposed to have a training plan in their annual EEO plan. So we look to see what that training plan is and what courses they're taking, and if there's holes or something missing, we let them know. We also direct them to where they can get free resources such as DCAS, where there's other resources that are more private and do cost some money, like Cornell, we direct them to where they need to go if they're unsure of how to get the training that we've identified they need.
Aren't EEOC officers required to take the DCAS training?
I'm actually not sure, but I know that there's been a lot of change going on and issues with the training where it's not being held as frequently, it's being rescheduled, and I think it has to do with COVID. I don't know what the specific requirement is, but I think that there's at least, if at a minimum, it's encouraged that all EEO officers go to the best practices meetings at DCAS and do an onboard training. I don't know what that training is. It's been changing.
Okay, could you find out, because it seems to me that within your standards, to the extent that the city itself is conducting a mandatory or suggested training, we probably ought to articulate that within our standards, that at the very minimum, to minimums, at the very minimum, that one of the standards is that the EO officer will have completed the mandatory or recommended training offered by DCAS or whoever offers it.
We usually do. Part of our
Yeah, but we ought to state it.
Okay.
I'm just following up on your point.
Yeah, no, understood.
But we ought to state it, that's all.
Okay.
My last point on the audit standards is around community board employment practices audit. Here I think we have an opportunity to really put to rest a real lapse around EEO compliance issues for community boards, around entity training. I think we should, I recommend that we also take the OR out here so that they ensure training on this and have a guide as well, right? So that they're trained and they have whatever resource guide is available. And individuals, and Jennifer, this is probably going to be a little bit of a lift for you, but I recommend encourage your input on this. But I think we could do a real service to the field by having the wording say, ensure that all individuals who work for and are appointed to the community board are subject to this training. And I know we're going to have to visit certain, I know there's probably a lot of, from the public officers law and to everything else, but I think that in 2022, which will be 2 months away from 2022, the thought of people who are appointed to community boards, 50 of them who outnumber the 3 or 4 who actually are employed and whose actions, behavior, attitudes, and practices are most dominant on what happens in community boards, are exempt from any type of sexual harassment, diversity, or any other kind of trainings. So I think that the EEPC, notwithstanding any resistance that we may encounter or different things, I think that we should, again, with the spirit of commitment and elevating the statute of EEPC, we should put that forth and then see who resists or who, what legal remedies, and have them make that argument as to why it's not proven.
Good luck in Staten Island.
But I'd like people to make that argument, that people appointed by the borough president or council members doing business on behalf of the city and the community around issues that require everything from land use to community facilities, everything, should not have at least some basic background or training on things like anti-sexual harassment in the workplace. I'm curious to hear, and I know Commissioner Reese might comment in terms of the historical point of view, but I think that this has been banted around back and forth for many years, if not decades. And I think this is an opportunity for the EPC to just put an end to it from our perspective, and then see who will resist or argue against that requirement or compliance around community boards being treated in a way similar to city employees in relation to what kind of training they should have to serve the public.
I have but one observation, and that is there are, 30 members of each of the community boards?
50. 50. 59 community boards.
And 59 community boards. And where, pray tell, are we going to provide or tell them that training is provided? I'm really being practical,
Yeah.
because suggesting it or demanding it without telling them where it's available for free, I think we're just asking for trouble. So I don't disagree with you. I think it is prudent on our part to say that anybody who's operating on behalf of the city should be trained in EOC as to disability, as to sexual harassment, as to hiring and promotion, all of that. But where is it available for them? Should we be supplying it? Should we figure out how DCAS can supply it? Somewhere.
Luckily, these resources are available in the sense that I know I had to, and I think maybe commissioners within the next year will have to as well. They're online trainings that you have to do as mandated just to work for the city. I think it's a 45-minute gender sensitivity or anti-harassment training.
Yeah.
And I know Governor Hochul, given the climate statewide, and I know there's that might even feel that the online thing might not even be, if that might be too de minimis, because while we know that you can't move to the next screen until you've heard the video, say, has this person touched you insensitively, or is this creating a hostile work, but there's even discussion that might need to be complemented by in-person experience, or, but that notwithstanding, I think that the resources are out there already for free that the city provides. And I think there's laws even for nonprofit communities or even corporate America, HR departments, to by law have to take these same city resource trainings that we have to our city employees.
So I think the issue that we have encountered with the community board members is that they fall in kind of a space that's between city employee and private employee. Private employers under the city local laws are required to provide training to their employees. The city, as an employer, is required to provide training to its employees. Community board members are not considered city employees because they're not paid. They are appointed by a borough president, which is not a mayoral appointee, and that is why we haven't really had jurisdiction over them and their practices, because we really have no way to reach them because they're not city employees. They can't take city employee training because you need to have a city ID number for that. They don't have an employer that they can get private training. So really, we're asking them to go out and find something on their own, which I think, Commissioner Reese, I agree with you that if we're going to be doing that, we need to identify something that is free and that we believe is an appropriate training. But I don't think we can necessarily require them to because we don't have a reach over them. They're not city employees.
When we audit a community board, we are only auditing their employees, not the members.
Yes,
I was going to
Commissioner
say,
Alcantara?
you said that they're appointed by the different borough presidents, and we audit the borough presidents.
Correct.
So it might be that you make it part of their mandate that they have to ensure that these people are trained, or I don't know how the law works.
I'm not sure how the appointment of community board members goes specifically.
Okay.
I can look
So
into
it's
it.
also the city council member. So it's the borough president and the city council member.
Well, it's the borough president's appointment, but the city council members nominate.
Right.
I think this is something that, we should push on. Community board members are not city employees. They're not private employees, right? However, they still have to take the conflicts of interest training, mandatory, right? Because they're doing business on behalf of the city.
Yeah.
So conflicts of interest, you can't take anything more than $50. Telling someone that and telling them something about what the laws are around gender equity, anti-sexual harassment is equally important, if not even more so. So I think elevating the subject matter is something that we should push. So whether
you put your finger on the problem. The conflict of interest training is given by the city and is free to them. So and it's mandatory, so you have to go to the Bar Association, which is where it used to be given. I don't know where it's
conflicts of interest board.
Yes,
Yeah, the
COIP does their own training. So if we are asking them to do training that DCAS is not required to provide to them, are we going to do the training? Because we definitely don't have the resources for that at our current staffing levels. Not if we want to make our mandate. So that's traditionally where we've had issues, where we don't have reach on them, so we can't say, oh, go to DCAS. DCAS is gonna say, great, we're gonna take on this training responsibility for all these folks that are not city employees. I don't think so. And then there's no independent agency that, such as ourselves, that can provide that training. That's where we have struggled in the past, and I agree that it's very important to ensure that those people have the appropriate training. I'm just not sure if we have the authority to require.
Mandate it.
What about mandating it to the city council? Because they are the ones appointed.
No, I think you're raising the issue of the appointing authority being the borough president.
Yeah.
I think is an appropriate one. I think, and in terms of not having a city ID, I know instances where you can issue like a certain authorization number to get around that kind of, I think there's gonna be a lot of obstacles, barriers.
Yeah.
But I think that we all know it's a problem, so figuring out the solution is probably where we should go with this. But if we have the language in what we audit, then people will have to figure out how to do
Well,
this.
but they
We
need
don't have a
that,
basis in law or policy for that language, though. We don't just mandate we don't create standards based upon, with no foundation, because we do get challenged. Where do you have the authority to require that? We point to best practices, we point to EOC guidance, we point to law, we point to policy. There is nothing that we could, at this point in my knowledge, and again, I'm willing to look into it, that we could then say, this is the basis for this particular requirement.
but even if that is a problem, if you could couple that with providing the free training to them, that would get over that barrier, because you are requiring them to adhere to something that's absolutely appropriate and binds everybody else, and we are doing that, and by the way, here is where you can get that training to meet that requirement. But we have a big hole because we can't find that training.
Right, and we would have to get DCAS on board if we were going to then ask them to train all these people, provide the workaround for not having a city ID to take the online training, the resources for in-person training. They're having problems already, providing some courses that they've had to reschedule a few times. So it would require us to do some homework before that change to the audit standard could be made, in my opinion. Okay.
So as part of the background work that needs to be done before any changes to the language, probably consulting EEO officers within borough president's offices, because the notion that they've never had a complaint, whether they can or cannot execute, because of whatever limitations, I'm sure they have, to figuring out, when a general counsel in the borough president's office gets a complaint from a community board member, that another community board member inappropriately did X, Y, and Z, the notion that, they're not a city employee or private employee, there's nothing we can do. Let them act how they wish. So I think that's not tenable. Mm-hmm. As well as if we can look into, not that this is the only way that we act upon rationalizing something, but if there's been any lawsuits or demands around this, that's something certainly the city is not, the EEPC has a responsibility to set standards and practices and enforce and monitor things that don't create liability, right, around this for the city. I just think that there are 2,950 people acting on behalf of the city. And the thought that 2,950 people can act on behalf of the city, and we're auditing only like 72 people, and say that's the culture of community boards, just not accurate. The 3,000 people is what's driving culture and community boards. So I think that if we can just figure out how we can possibly move the needle.
Definitely look into seeing if there's something legally based. I do think that in the past, well, especially with the sexual harassment prevention, it's my understanding that, and again, I'm just speaking from my own experience, many of the community board members have other employment in New York City, which means they are then being trained by their employers under the required mandate of local law that private employers train their folks. So we have taken some solace in the idea that they are probably being trained through their private employer, again, that does not hit the problem head-on, but it has been.
Some may be, some may not. So the
Yeah.
answer is they're not uniform.
We
The
can't-
appointments are
yeah,
not
we can't.
uniform.
Nope.
I would suggest to you that the Manhattan appointments and the Bronx appointments are probably quite different. And that you have people who are probably retired, people who are unemployed, all sorts of other people. I just, I think relying on the fact that others may be doing it, I agree with you, Commissioner. I think we can't rely on others. We have to make sure it's being done. But until we resolve the issue of the delivery of free training, I don't see how we're going to be able to mandate it. So that's where I am, perhaps somewhat cynical, but I don't think we can go forward and place a mandate unless we can come forward with the training answer. So I would suggest we place this on old business and try to figure out where we are at the next meeting.
Any more?
I agree, yeah.
So tabled while more due diligence occurs around this issue, and then hopefully, will that delay anything if that particular language? We're talking about just adding a couple of words, but the impact of it is tremendous.
I don't think it will have a huge impact on our operations, especially if we're redoing the audit plan and we may not even have community boards on the first year of the audit plan. This would be something that wouldn't be even implemented until year 2. So I don't think that operationally this is going to cause too much of a hiccup for us in moving forward with our plans.
Fair enough. And as part of the diligence process, giving us a sense who the stakeholders are that we should be speaking to around this. I think the Commission of Human Rights, although there's going to be a lot of transition, so I think the Commission of Human Rights and others will be very probably relieved, right, that we may be even taking this on, because I think this is an issue that's percolating, and it's folks don't know under whose jurisdiction or how or when or what. So just because those questions aren't answered doesn't mean it's not important. So we definitely appreciate the EEPC taking this on. Thank you.
Yep, look into it.
Next, we have the next order of business is the compliance update. The status of the 2021 audit plan compliance monitoring.
We do not have any resolutions on the agenda for today. That is because as we get towards the end of the year, we don't really have that many to present to you. We currently have 5 agencies in compliance monitoring. 4 of those 5 have under 7 corrective actions remaining. Their compliance monitoring periods end either the end of November, the end of December. I am very confident that those 4 we will get on the agenda and we will hit 52 compliance resolutions. That is my goal. The last agency has more and will require more work, and I'm not sure if that is going to be an agency that we can get into full compliance by the end of the year. Perhaps with working with them we might, but I don't know, and I would prefer not to speak specifics of a particular audit on camera. So if you want to discuss it in executive session, that's fine too.
Thank you for your update. Next order of business, we have the research update, status of local law 13, report year 2. Woo-hoo, Leticia.
Good morning. So we are making steady progress in the development of the year 2 report. We have spoken with some of our sister entities at OCEI as well as DCAS. We've also been in contact with some of the community colleges regarding the extraction of their data. We have included women in the year 2 report, and we are wrapping up our year-over-year trends, so we will go back and add women to year 1 so that we can see how they fared last year as well as how they're faring this year. So you'll see that reflected in the tables. We are certainly doing a deeper dive on underutilization analysis that includes doing some model testing. So we are looking to see if we're able to make causal or inferential claims based upon our findings. It's still a bit premature to offer any findings at this juncture, but we do believe that we are on target and can provide a much more in-depth report early January, but we believe that we will be on target to complete our report on time.
Commissioner Reese?
Yeah, when would we get your draft report? You think our first meeting is January 20th, and our second meeting of next year is February 24th, and this report is due what?
February 15th.
So is it possible for us to get an earlier draft before the January 20 meeting?
Yes, that's the plan, for us to get it to you early January so that we have all feedback and considerations back not later than that meeting.
January
Yes.
20, so that any modifications that you would have to make, you can do in a timely fashion to have it filed on time.
That's correct.
Okay. All right, that's...
Any other questions regarding the research update, status of local law 13, report year 2?
No, but back on, and a further comment, but back on my suggestion that you, before you open audit, that you meet with the commissioner in charge. Let's assume for a minute that the police department is in March. I would go there with the local law report and as part of what our undertaking is, but a report as to as part of that meeting, just so that there's an understanding of how their performance on underutilization was. And I'm just using, I apologize, but it's not just police, I don't mean to point out, but I'm certain that because your numbers are going to be on larger entities, you're going to have a more profound finding, I suspect, based on underutilization, so that it would be part of a discussion, not only just a showing of our purpose and what we do to help them. Anyway, that's just part of the recommendation, my point of view.
Let me take. Any other? So next, we have a series of items that will be discussed in executive session. And unless I hear otherwise, I think we're going to take a vote to go into executive session. Then we have to get out of executive session and then come back into public session, I imagine, to adjourn under public view. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm, that's correct.
Yes. So can I have a motion to exit? Can I have a motion to exit this session and go into executive session?
So moved.
We have a motion from Commissioner Reese. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second from Commissioner Alcantara. All in favor to exit
Aye.
into executive session? Say aye. Aye. All opposed? Abstentions? Hearing none, we're going to executive session now. We'll be turning off the cameras, which we've been live streaming, and will also be recorded for our archives. And please let me know, Michael, when we're off camera.